Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live on the phone with me today, I have Lauren Hogan in Atlanta, Georgia. Lauren is the Vice President of the Southeast Digital and Integrated Sales at USA Today. She has over 25 years in cross-platform media sales and management, cross-category national advertising sales, and leadership with a strong track record for building teams and achieving aggressive goals. Lauren, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Angela. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yes. Well, I told you before we got started that your background is so great that I'm hoping that we can cover a lot of different topics because there are multiple sort of facets I think are going to be really interesting to people today.
Great. I certainly hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, working at an organization like USA Today is really a dream for many people. I mean, it's just something that I think a lot of our listeners probably aspire to. I'm curious, how did you get started in your career?
Well, it's kind of funny. It started even before I got out of college. I worked with my father. He had a small business, and we would do mailings. And whenever we got a sale, he'd give me extra money, hourly wage. So that kind of got me started as being excited about sales.
Uh-huh.
And then I went to Northeastern University because I was ready to work. I know most people are. And we did I paid co-op, so I had 2 years of experience before I even got out of college.
Oh, that's exciting. So when you did your co-op, did you kind of take time off of school to do that?
Well, if you know, I don't know if you're familiar with Northeastern University in Boston,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a 5-year college, and you go year-round, and you interview like anyone would for any job, and you win the job against colleagues or students within the college, and then you participate for 6 months, and then you go back to school. So summers were part of it, and by the time you graduate, you have a full degree and 2 years of work.
Wow, that's so great. And did you do sales for your co-op as well?
Well, I did some sales. I did marketing and PR for an electric company and also an importer-exporter. It doesn't sound like anything I'm doing now, but what it gave me experience in was working in teams and working as part of an office environment. And you realize pretty quickly that, there's a lot to learn. So also the interviewing skills of just understanding how to interview and what people want to know about you that can help you retain the next job.
Oh, that's interesting. So by the time you graduated, did you know that you wanted to go in a sales route?
I did because in marketing and PR is awesome, but they're much more of office jobs. And I realized very quickly, compared to what I was doing even with my father, it was a little more boring. And I found that people were really ready to go at 5, and the days were longer. So I felt that passion right away that sales was more the job I wanted to do.
Oh, that's interesting. I talk to people sometimes who maybe have a background in sales, and they're interested in sort of more of a marketing kind of job, but then they struggle to sort of be at that desk all day long and kind of be chained, into their cubicle. So it sounds like with sales, you get to move around more and it's a little more dynamic.
Yeah. It's really much more entrepreneurial, I would say, whereas the marketing and PR, probably a little more corporate driven. That's just from my perspective, whereas sales, you're kind of scheduling your own time, your own day, and you have to be very proactive in what you do. And it just felt right to me.
Yeah.
But I think I've mentioned to you before that it's not for everyone.
Sure.
Sales is not for everyone.
Right, absolutely. Well, if we, as a job seeker, were interested to work for a well-known media outlet similar to the one you work for, what do you recommend that we do to actually get our foot in the door? And is it something that we should do early in our career, or is it something we could also do later?
I think you can do it at any time in your career, but I think what's really important is to use technology. I think that with LinkedIn, it's easier than ever to find connections with companies and people that you want to know, or people who are doing things that you want to know, that you want to pursue. So I've worked with, colleagues who their kids want to get into the business from college, or colleagues who want to change jobs. But I think that that's the way to go, is through the connections through technology, or joining community groups or volunteer groups or industry situations where you're going to meet the people for the places you want to work.
Yeah, it's really good advice. So when it comes to technology, a lot of times when we consider things like LinkedIn and reaching out to people, say at a big, news outlet or just a big company that we're really impressed by, sometimes we tend to think that we might bother those people, especially if we don't know them already. Since you're in sales, what is your perspective on reaching out to someone on LinkedIn who you don't already know? Is that something you should not do, or how should we pursue that?
I think that the best way, honestly, is through other people, because you can see who's connected to the people you want to know. If you don't know anyone who's connected, I would try to find somebody within the industry. It's not to say that you can never reach out directly. I just think people are very busy in their day, and I know when I get inquiries from people I don't know, I do tend to ignore them. Mm-hmm. It's just the best thing to do is to find somebody who's related. It's not a big faux pas to reach out directly. It just may not bring you the success you want.
Sure, absolutely. Well, as people are approaching you for jobs, what is a big mistake that you see them making? Like, what's something that maybe we should do a little differently?
Well, I haven't seen huge major things, but kind of to your prior point, I've seen people pursue me very heavily for a position, and I think it's just a waste of time because we do have processes in place for, sending in your resume, and we can't talk with every person, but I will often talk with people if they're recommended by someone I respect. So again, it kind of goes back to the prior point of how you reach out. There's always somebody who knows somebody, and I just think to get somebody's attention, it can't be just blind reaching out and continuous calling. Mm-hmm. So you have to be aggressive, especially when you're going for a media or a sales role or a new company. But the aggressiveness should be in the steps you take to get into consideration, not going after that person constantly.
Yeah, I totally agree. Have you ever had anyone do anything that was kind of really outside the box and just a little strange as they were applying?
Years and years ago, I had a man send me a picture of him, and it was really out of context on the front steps with a muscle shirt on, along with the follow-up note. And I thought, I don't know, this is kind of out of the box for sure, but not in the right way.
Right. That's funny. Someone told me once about a job seeker who sent them like a golf club or something and said, I'll be coming to pick this up at my interview or something like that. And the person thought, no, you just won't be getting this golf club back. Because I don't know why you sent this here.
Yeah, there's some. I've been lucky. I think I've met with a lot of professionals, but yeah, there's been some strange occurrences for sure.
Yeah. Well, so as you're looking for people for your team or for the area of the business that you work in, what kinds of things are you looking for in potential candidates? What traits do you look for?
Well, it's hard because it depends on what job I'm looking for always, and the context of what I need on the team. So the team is always in consideration. But I look for consistency. I know people do go from job to job because that's how they sometimes can get promoted, and it's not as in style to stay with the company. But I get concerned if there's too much jumping around and it's unrelated and there's no good reason for it. Mm-hmm. So time spent within companies is very important. Promotions that they've received within the company, and also a college degree really is important in the roles that we hire for here at Gannett and USA Today. But we hire like A players, and those are the ones who really go above and beyond, that are well liked and respected and have potential to move up. So that's what we go for. So anything that can demonstrate those qualities is something I look for when I'm interviewing people or when I'm looking over their resume.
Yeah, I think a lot of people use the term A player because it is so important to get someone on your team who is a top performer. From your perspective, what are the kinds of things that you see that say to you, this is the A player? Is it the things you mentioned in terms of consistency and promotions, or are there other sort of things that jump out, for the A player category?
Well, I think it's people who continue to learn and grow. A lot of people come in and say, I can learn anything, especially if they're switching industries or switching careers or companies. But then when you dig deeper into it, what have you done to learn more about that? If that's something you want to pursue, they haven't done any continuing education or certification or, read trade publications that may be of interest. So I look for people who are backing up what they're saying. It's okay to want to switch, or you're busy, or say you want to obtain some skills. It's an A player for the people actually pursuing it.
Mm-hmm. No, this is such a good point. In terms of, college degree, you mentioned that they need to have a college degree. Is there a certain type of degree that you're looking for generally?
Well, in marketing and sales, we prefer it to be in marketing or advertising, but it doesn't have to be. Being funny about it, sometimes I say a psychology degree would be best. but really there's quite a bit of background that contributes to a successful salesperson. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say where it's a Bachelor of Science degree in marketing is typical.
Mm-hmm. No, sure. That makes a lot of sense. It's interesting because sometimes college students will approach me, or even the parents of college students, and they will be really stressed about should they switch majors and what's the perfect major for the perfect job. And, I think sometimes, although some majors are better than others, a lot of times it's best to graduate.
Exactly. Yeah, I think within each degree you can do different things. If you're going to be a nurse or a doctor, you probably have a very specific path. But in business, I think there can be a variety of people, and it requires a variety of folks and backgrounds.
Yeah, so it sounds like you might be open to considering a candidate that doesn't have the perfect background. Is that right?
Yes, and I have often hired people without the perfect background. 10 years ago, I have hired people outside of advertising and sales, but they were associated with the industry in one way or another, and they had other qualities like the presence, the ability, the prior abilities I talked about, and skills. So I am open to it because it's more about the right team member that I think will round out our team.
Sure. So if someone came to you and didn't quite have the right background, what could they do to kind of convince you to take them into consideration, even though maybe they came from a different industry or they had a really different background, but they felt very confident that this was the right role for them?
Well, it goes back to demonstrating. They would have to show me that they were serious about it, that they were pursuing something that I needed. So they would have to know a lot about the company, a lot about what we are trying to do down the road that would help our team in the future. So just to give an example, I recently hired someone within our company who had no sales background. They were more in the supportive sales role, and that's pretty much unheard of in a national sales role to be able to jump to that. But she pursued specific projects and actually was able to help close a sale. And so I was able to see her in a different light. And I know that comes from being internal, but I really was not going to hire this person, and it turned out to be one of the best things I ever did.
Wow.
So it is possible.
Yeah. That's great. I think the theme that I'm hearing from you with a couple of these questions has been, the ability to kind of be almost like the CEO of your own career and to not sit back and wait for someone else to teach you something, that you actually go forward and try to learn things on your own.
That's so true. I see so many people who are frustrated that they either weren't asked inside of a company to go to the next level, and people have been hired from the outside. And we're always going to need people from the outside, but the people internally who demonstrate, you're always interviewing for your next position. So the people who have demonstrated the skills and the actual intention to move up to the next thing that they want to do are the ones who get those jobs. But I'm amazed when I see people not do anything toward that, and then they're like, how could I have been passed over for that? Or why didn't I get the opportunity? Like they're waiting for someone to come to them and ask them to be in that position rather than demonstrating and going after it.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I see the same thing with sometimes with people who are waiting for their work to train them on some new skill versus going out and just learning that skill on their own.
Exactly. I mean, I went through that when we transitioned in media. Everything's about digital, and I had a huge interest in it early on, and read about it, worked with colleagues in the industry that I knew more than I did. So by the time it was internally we had to demonstrate it even more, I was already very familiar and comfortable with that category of media sales. So the folks who waited, it's just harder to learn till someone comes to you and says, "Hey, we're gonna train you on this." You want to already be knowledgeable and comfortable. So you have to be able to look ahead and prepare yourself.
I totally agree. And I think your example about digital is just right on, because occasionally I will meet job seekers who are interested in a career in digital, but the person maybe isn't naturally particularly entrepreneurial and will say to me, "Angela, I just need someone to teach me all about digital marketing." And I'll say, you've really got to get out there, because digital marketing changes so quickly that if you're not actively pursuing your own education, it will really pass you by, because there's no one who's going to be able to just teach it to you.
Yeah, and I think people, especially if they've been working for quite a while, forget that you still need to pursue learning. The longer you're in your career, you should do it even more so. So you can get certifications, or you can go back to school, but you've got to find the time to learn and grow. And I think that's in every industry. It doesn't matter what trade you're doing. You're going to need new skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we focused a lot on sort of work, and when we put together our resumes, we focus a lot on our work history, our experience, and our educational history. Is there ever anything that a candidate could potentially put on their resume that they do outside of work that might impress you?
Yes. I like to see what people do when they're not working. So leadership roles in the community, athletic endeavors, people who run marathons, or it's amazing when you ask people what they do outside of work. Some of the stuff is so fun and interesting. I had hired somebody who was very kind of quiet and great at sales, but I had no idea they were an amazing musician. And they played on stage. And, it just gives you a perspective and a depth about a person very different than... And you really, when you're hiring someone, you want them to be like an onion, a few layers, not just selling, because it makes them more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes those things that a person does outside of work, like music, for example, or sports, it's something a lot of different people can relate to. So maybe if they don't have the exact educational background that you have or the exact work experience, you can definitely relate on the level of music and have a good conversation about that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so much of your background, as we kind of discussed, it's really focused on sales and related to sales. So for those of us who are listening that are interested in starting our own career in sales, do you have any tips for us on how to get started and, what we should be looking for and what we should be avoiding?
It's hard to say what people should or shouldn't do because it depends on what they like to do. But I will tell you, sales is not about having lunch and backslapping. I think people think it's much easier than it is, and you have to have a passion for what you're selling. You have to love the company that you work for, the product that you're selling, and the people. I actually read about, dream about, and spend time learning about my business. And if it's not ingrained in you, it kind of comes out when you're with customers, because spending time learning about your business is a full-time job. So it can't be something that's a burden to you, so you have to love it. And that's what I've seen in the most successful salesperson, is a passion for what they're doing.
Absolutely. Well, what about personality-wise? Are there certain traits that are better for someone that might go into sales than others?
I've seen salespeople with all different personalities, but I do think that you have to have a very a curious level about you. You have to want to meet new people. You have to be excited about being in groups and working with teams. So if you, personality-wise, like to be on your own and not share, there are positions like that you can sit in your office and just do your work. This is not one of them. So you do have to like people.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Well, occasionally I will talk to people who, have been given an offer to do sales at, just some random company that maybe I haven't heard of. And the offer will be 100% commission. I've never worked in sales, so I don't have as much of a foundation in that particular area. How normal is that, do you think, to have a sales position that's 100% commission?
I haven't run into it. I mean, I think the smaller the company, the more they're likely to do that. If you were to take on that type of position, I would want to do a lot of research on the company and make sure they're not just, I'd look at sales figures. What are they looking to achieve? How, what is the percentage? Because it can be very profitable for people with the right product. But if it's somebody who has nothing to lose by putting you on it just to see if you sell something, I don't think it's really something you want to pursue. No, I would just want a little more feedback on that.
I totally agree. So it sounds like maybe one of the questions we should just be asking in general when we're interviewing for sales jobs might be about the sort of performance goals and the expectations.
Right, and how successful they've been in the past.
Yeah, and it sounds like if the company can't answer that pretty easily, it may be a red flag, I would think.
I would think, because everybody's time is precious, and there are situations where that does make sense, but you just can't go into it blindly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you mentioned something that I'd like to ask you about, which is you talked a little bit about looking for people who looking to promote people internally. And as I was kind of learning, more about your own background, you have a really impressive career, and you've been at USA Today for quite a long time. In addition to being a vice president, you've also been director of advertising, senior account executive, and manager of audience sales. So you've really been promoted within the company quite a bit. And I'll tell you, in 2016, so far, this has probably been the number one question that I have been asked over and over is, how do you get an internal promotion? How can you get recognized within your own organization, and what should you do? So I'm wondering if you can provide a little bit of feedback for those of us who want to get a promotion within our existing company.
I'd be happy to. I mean, it was hard fought. It looks easier on a resume when you see the same logo 6 times, but I moved a couple times. I moved from New York to D.C., our headquarters, and then moved to Atlanta. So I've moved a couple times, moved my family to work, to continue to gain new opportunity. So it isn't always within where I'm already sitting. The other part of it is I take on the new projects. I mean, you have to do the hard work. So a lot of the projects I took on extra for my company were things no one else wanted to do, and they led to the next step. So when I went from audience sales to advertising sales, that was because one of the programs I was working on was heavily advertising based. So that's how I got my my interest in the advertising piece of it. So to get promoted within, it's harder. It's really harder because you're seen a certain way. Maybe people see you in the role you're in. You've got to get people to see you in the role you want to be in. And that sounds a little cliche, but that means doing extra work and working hard and being successful each time that you do it.
When you say do extra work, do you mean volunteering for projects that are outside your current scope of responsibility?
Exactly. Sometimes it can be that, or it can be a geographic territory that has been vacated by someone and they need like a bridge. So, I've volunteered to help out in certain categories and learned from that. So it can be many different ways, but I've seen people also say, why would I want that extra headache? And every project, every additional opportunity I've taken that solved the problem for my management has also taught me a lot. So I've never regretted, and I've done it a lot, I've never regretted taking on extra work. And it didn't necessarily mean tons more hours. It just meant learning new things.
Right, absolutely. Well, so you also mentioned, and I noticed that, you've moved a lot, like geographically, to different places. Were you always open to moving, or did you feel that your openness to moving helped you to get these promotions?
It definitely helped me. I remember the first time I moved from New York to D.C., there were two opportunities. One was local, and it was actually a management position, and then one was a national sales position, but I wasn't going to manage, and I picked the national sales one. So I had to move to D.C., and I actually had an opportunity to be promoted locally. But it was the best move I ever made. So I've been open to moving at times. I haven't always been open to moving. I've stayed in Atlanta for like 10 years now. So
yeah, absolutely.
But you do have to have an open mind about it.
Right. I think it's a really good point. It's one I have not really covered too much, but I do speak with job seekers pretty often who have a particular city that they really would like to live in, and they want a very particular kind of job making a certain amount of money in that city. And sometimes there are just...
Don't we all?
Right. Sometimes there are just only so many options. So if you're not flexible to move geographically, sometimes you have to be more flexible on other things.
Right.
Or vice versa.
Yeah. I've had people that wanted to work inside the perimeter in Atlanta, literally, and it's such a small scope. So I think that you have to put your priorities in order, and if that's the most important thing, that's fine. But you got to be flexible in a lot of ways to get what you want.
Absolutely. Well, so I'm curious, because your career has been, so long and successful at one organization, did you seek out mentors at all during your time at USA Today?
I've had tons, and that's one thing I didn't touch on, but tons of awesome direct managers. I've been very lucky. Gannett and USA Today have awesome leadership, and that has helped. I've also looked for coaches outside the company. So when programmatic advertising came along, I looked to peers in the industry. So that's been very successful too. So my mentors don't have to be within or a direct boss, but outside the industry.
That's a good point. So when you seek out mentors, do you seek out someone with a particular skill set that you're interested to learn more about, or are you just looking for someone in general?
I do look for certain skill sets I need. So if I know, I had to forgive myself a long time ago, particularly in media, that I don't know everything. So I sometimes will seek out people who I know have particular skills, have done things that I haven't done. But I also look for people who are very successful at what they do and people that I admire and respect in the way that they manage themselves, because there's a lot of successful people that I don't necessarily want to be like. So I think that they have to match what I am like. So I look for people who I can admire and achieve what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Well, you mentioned something a couple of times that I want to be sure that our listeners understand, which is you mentioned Gannett. And my understanding is that Gannett is a larger organization that owns multiple media outlets, including USA Today. Is that a correct statement?
Well, recently, as of late last year, Gannett, there's a new Gannett. So it is one company. So the USA Today network you see encompasses not only USA Today, but also a bunch of local, successful companies, so like the Arizona Republic, the Des Moines Register. And in the digital world, it is 100 million plus uniques. So we sell across a broad spectrum, and Gannett is our corporate company. So the USA Today network represents a lot of different publications.
Right. I'm actually based out of Memphis, Tennessee, and I believe that Gannett actually recently purchased our largest newspaper here in the city, which is called the Commercial Appeal.
Absolutely. I just talked to the publisher there about right before talking to you. So
no way, that's great.
And the Nashville Tennessean is one. So yeah, lots of very awesome pubs.
Yeah, I know everyone here was very excited when that happened. So I heard about it right away when it occurred. Well, you mentioned something I think that's really important to think about, and that is sometimes when we think of organizations like USA Today, we think of what comes out in print. But in reality, your job is very focused on the online world and the mobile side of the business. I talk with people all the time who are interested to be, say, like a writer for a newspaper or some other sort of position. What advice would you give to those of us who are just beginning to enter into the world of media as it concerns, the online digital space?
Well, I would say if you don't like digital, I wouldn't get into the media space because that is the future. We have, as I mentioned, 100-plus unique audience from our collective media network. And USA Today, every one of our local properties has print, and USA Today has print, and it's still a critical audience. But a lot of what we're working on toward the future is video and digital video and desktop and mobile particularly, which is the future audience and where everyone is going. So you have to like print because that's a big part of what we're doing, but I think that the future is much more about digital, obviously.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I think it's such an important message. Well, for anyone who's listening that's interested to learn more about Gannett or USA Today, where should we go online to learn more?
Well, you can, to see usatoday.com news in particular, you can download our apps on mobile and tablet. Also go to the iTunes store and usatoday.com, obviously. And then we have podcasts on Stitcher, just like you do. But basically our website has all the corporate information, too, that you would need to know.
Oh, that's great. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
This discussion's been very helpful. And thanks, everyone, for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of the Copeland Coaching Podcast. And if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher so you never miss an episode.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.